I managed to find these amazing historical photos quite recently. Write in the comments, which photo did you like the most? Grady Stiles Jr., known as Lobster Boy, murdered his daughter's fiancé one day before their wedding, but received only probation. In 1992, his wife and stepson hired a man to kill him. Judy Garland was 46 when this photo was taken in Copenhagen in March 1969. 3 months later, the legendary star was found dead from an accidental barbiturate overdose. This First World War drip rifle used water slowly filling a tin to pull the trigger automatically. Its carefully timed shots fooled enemy troops into believing the trench was still occupied while Australian soldiers secretly retreated. This mugshot shows 18-year-old Nicolae Ceausescu after his arrest for communist agitation in Romania in 1936. The young prisoner later became Romania's dictator, ruling the country through fear for more than 2 decades. This girl was celebrating her birthday when the September 11th attacks suddenly took over the television. Her family photo captured the exact moment an ordinary celebration became part of history. On August 1, 1976, Niki Lauda crashed at the Nürburgring and became trapped inside his burning Ferrari. 4 fellow drivers pulled him from the wreck, but he suffered severe burns and returned to racing just 6 weeks later. United States Marines passed through the ruins of a small town on Tinian on July 31, 1944. Capturing the island gave American bombers a base within striking distance of Japan. This photograph shows the University of Texas Tower through a bullet hole after Charles Whitman opened fire on August 1, 1966. He killed his wife and mother before climbing the tower, where officers ended his 96-minute attack. In 1973, Syrian schoolgirls were taught how to assemble and disassemble rifles. The lesson reflected the growing role of military training in Syrian education. Nick Ut photographed South Vietnamese parents and their 5 children fleeing toward Saigon on one overloaded motorbike in June 1972. Just 11 days earlier, he had taken the famous Napalm Girl photograph. This photo shows an early electroshock treatment, with electrodes placed near the patient's temples to trigger a controlled seizure. Before anesthesia and muscle relaxants became standard, patients could suffer broken bones from the violent convulsions. In 1970, Oregon officials used half a ton of dynamite to destroy a whale carcass near Florence. The blast sent huge chunks of flesh raining onto spectators and crushed a nearby car. In the 1930s, daring riders raced ostriches for public entertainment. These powerful birds can sprint at more than 40 miles per hour, but controlling them is nearly impossible. In 1935, Clem Sohn jumped from 12,000 feet, wearing homemade canvas wings attached to steel tubing. He survived and stunned crowds by gliding, banking, and looping through the air before opening his parachute. This man flew a 1937 Stearman biplane while his wife walked on its wings high above the ground. One wrong step or sudden move could have thrown her into the open sky. In 1983, motorcycle stuntman Chris Bromham launched high above a row of double-decker buses. The British Daredevil later set a world record by clearing 14 buses in one jump. In November 1946, this English surgeon used a hand-powered brace and bit to drill into a patient's skull before a lobotomy. The operation permanently severed connections in the brain's frontal lobes. This is 12-year-old Dragoljub Jelicic defending Belgrade from Austro-Hungarian forces in 1914. He survived the First World War, became an actor, and later fought with the Yugoslav partisans during the Second World War. In 1932, this red train carried the first harvest from Oleksiivka to Soviet government depots. During the Holodomor, such brigades seized grain and other food from Ukrainian peasants, leaving entire villages to starve. In 1915, an Australian soldier carries a wounded comrade away from the fighting at Gallipoli. Rough ground, intense heat, and constant gunfire made every rescue in the Dardanelles campaign dangerously difficult. In September 1940, 3 children sat outside the ruins of their home in East London after a German bombing raid. The attack came during the Blitz, when London endured 57 consecutive nights of bombing. This Durham cafe had separate doors marked white and colored under Jim Crow segregation. Even a quick lunch forced black customers to enter through a different door. In 1911, Breaker Boys in Pennsylvania picked sharp slate from moving coal by hand. Thick coal dust filled their lungs, and this dangerous child labor continued until the early 1920s. In August 1968, Prague protesters surrounded Soviet tanks sent to crush the Prague Spring. Some climbed onto the vehicles and confronted armed soldiers face to face. On May 25, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 crashed moments after takeoff from Chicago O'Hare when its left engine tore away. All 271 people aboard and 2 people on the ground were killed. In 1910, Pitt County prisoners lived in mobile cage wagons and were forced to build roads across North Carolina. Bloodhounds guarded the camp and hunted down anyone who tried to escape. Civil rights activists dressed as Ku Klux Klan members outside the 1964 Republican Convention. Their shocking protests targeted racist groups supporting presidential candidate Barry Goldwater after he opposed the Civil Rights Act. A lone soldier approaches a suspected bomb in Northern Ireland during the 1970s. Early bomb disposal teams often worked without modern protective suits, knowing one hidden trigger could kill them instantly. Robert Kennedy celebrates winning the California primary at the Ambassador Hotel just after midnight on June 5, 1968. Minutes later, Sirhan shot him in the hotel kitchen pantry, and Kennedy died the next day. These teenage soldiers of the 12th SS Panzer Division were captured during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. Many had been recruited directly from the Hitler Youth. German troops watch a Bosnian village burn during the Second World War. Such fires were often used to punish communities suspected of helping resistance fighters. This aerial photograph shows French poison gas spreading across the Somme battlefield around 1917. Gas clouds could drift back toward the soldiers who released them, turning a planned attack into a deadly trap. This wreckage is James Dean's Porsche Spyder after he collided with another car near Cholame on September 30, 1955. Dean died at just 24, while the other driver survived. On December 7, 1941, Japanese sailors cheered as aircraft launched from a carrier toward Pearl Harbor. Hours later, their surprise attack killed more than 2,400 Americans and pulled the United States into the Second World War. On August 9, 1925, Ku Klux Klan members burned an 80-foot cross before a massive crowd. The towering symbol made intimidation visible from far beyond the gathering. This photograph shows the wreckage of one of Stockholm's earliest car bombings in 1926. The intended victim was killed instantly, and investigators searched the shattered vehicle for clues to the attacker. On February 3, 1959, this plane crashed near Clear Lake, Iowa, killing Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, and pilot Roger Peterson. The tragedy became known as the day the music died. After MS Estonia sank on September 28, 1994, a survivor flashed his camera to signal rescuers and accidentally photographed another man on the capsized hull. Both men survived, but 852 people died. On March 19, 1945, the cruiser Santa Fe pulled alongside the burning aircraft carrier Franklin. Despite exploding bombs and ammunition, her crew fought the fires and rescued more than 800 sailors. After Nazi Germany annexed Austria in March 1938, Jews were forced to scrub political slogans from Vienna's streets. Austrian Nazis and local residents watched and mocked them, turning public humiliation into a spectacle. In July 1945, bombers from the USS Essex attacked Hakodate during raids that shattered Japan's northern transport network. This rare image captures Avenger and Helldiver aircraft releasing their bombs in formation. This rare photograph shows Stalin and Trotsky together at Felix Dzerzhinsky's funeral in July 1926. Within 12 years, Stalin had Trotsky exiled and Kamenev and Zinoviev executed. In 1946, chemist Bruno Tesch, left, faced trial for supplying Zyklon B to Nazi concentration camps while knowing it was used to kill prisoners. He and Karl Weinbacher were convicted and executed, while Joachim Drossen was acquitted. On September 16, 1952, Korean War refugees crowded aboard the United States Navy ship Weiss. Many carried children and everything they had left after fleeing the fighting. This is Iran's former Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh under house arrest in 1965. A CIA-backed coup removed him 12 years earlier after he nationalized Iran's oil industry. In 1936, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt stood beneath the massive guns of the USS Indianapolis while sailing to South America. 9 years later, the same ship sank in the deadliest disaster in United States Navy history. In 1978, two teams drove tiny Zastava 750 cars around Belgrade's Tasmaidan Stadium, pushing a giant football. This bizarre Yugoslav sport was called Autoball, a full-contact mix of football and demolition derby. This giant 65-centimeter refractor was installed at the Berlin University Observatory in Potsdam in 1924. Its massive moving structure let astronomers aim the long telescope with remarkable precision to study stars, planets, and distant double-star systems. On February 13, 1991, 2 American bombs struck Baghdad's Amaria air raid shelter. More than 400 civilians were reported killed, while the reinforced concrete building was left ripped open and filled with twisted steel. President Kennedy leaves Hotel Texas in Fort Worth on November 22, 1963. Hours later, after flying to Dallas, he was assassinated during his motorcade through Dealey Plaza. Inside a B-24 Liberator in Fort Worth, men and women installed vital equipment in 1942. The bomber contained thousands of parts, and its cramped fuselage forced workers to assemble many of them by hand. During Slovenia's 10-day war in 1991, Yugoslav soldiers surrendered after their units were surrounded and supply lines were cut. The brief conflict killed more than 70 people and marked the first armed break in Yugoslavia's violent collapse. At just 21, Hassan al-Bolkiah was crowned Sultan of Brunei on this golden throne in 1968. He had taken power the year before and is now the world's longest-serving current monarch. On March 21, 1945, flak tore the left wing from a 26B Invader number 43-2-2359 over Velen, Germany. The aircraft plunged upside down just 7 weeks before Germany surrendered. This photo shows the ruins of Cinema Rex in Iran, where locked exits trapped hundreds during an arson attack in August 1978. The fire killed around 400 people and became one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in history. Marilyn Monroe poses with a horse in Banff in 1953 while filming River of No Return. During the shoot, she injured her ankle, but production continued with her leg in a cast. In the 1960s, Iran's Health Corps sent nurses into rural villages to teach women about birth control. The program brought family planning information to mothers who had rarely received professional medical advice. This 1930 newspaper joke claimed the equator had finally been photographed as a broad white line. The schooner appears to struggle across it, turning an imaginary map line into a convincing obstacle. Armed Red Guards marched through Petrograd's Palace Square during the chaos of 1917. Months after the Russian Empire collapsed, the Bolsheviks seized power under Vladimir Lenin and changed world history. Richard Nixon and Anwar Sadat visited the pyramids of Giza with their wives during Nixon's historic trip to Egypt in 1974. The visit followed the restoration of diplomatic relations after 7 years of hostility between the two countries. Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, visited Mexico in 1963. The Soviet hero traded his flight helmet for a giant sombrero, creating one of the most unexpected photos of the space race. For his 80th birthday, Mel Blanc received a restored 1958 Edsel from his son, Noel. Bugs Bunny joined the celebration, honoring the man who had voiced him for nearly 50 years. Oscar Zeta Acosta became famous as the real-life inspiration for Dr. Gonzo in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. In May 1974, the controversial lawyer vanished in Mexico at age 39 and was never seen again. Born in India in the 1870s, Lalu Rampersad had a parasitic twin attached to his chest. He became a famous sideshow performer, known for his lavish clothes, love of billiards, and popularity with women. In late 1980s, Afghanistan, a man built this strange bus by mounting a Mi-8 helicopter fuselage on a Kamaz truck. The aircraft's cabin became passenger space, creating one of the most unusual homemade vehicles ever photographed. In 1982, Elspeth Beard became the first English woman to circle the world by motorcycle. She rode 35,000 miles alone on a BMW, finishing the dangerous journey 2 years later. In 1906, Kaiser Wilhelm II posed for this rare color portrait made with 3 separate glass plates. The process captured sharper detail than autochrome, but even tiny movements could ruin the final image. This wrecked Japanese Nakajima Scion reconnaissance plane was found at Tinian after United States forces captured the island in July 1944. Behind it stands a marine transport aircraft, surrounded by the remains of Japan's shattered airbase. Sideshow posters often used cruel caricatures to sell tickets, stripping disabled performers of their real names and humanity. Collectors now preserve these disturbing objects in protected archives, where they expose how entertainment once turned human difference into profit. In 1976, a boy rode through Central Park with 3 trained cats. 2 balanced on homemade carts behind his bicycle, while the 3rd sat calmly in the front basket. Ford workers protest Henry Ford's ties to Nazi Germany in 1941. 3 years earlier, Hitler's government had awarded Ford its highest honor for a foreigner. Iraqi soldiers celebrate atop an armored personnel carrier on February 28, 2003. 20 days later, the United States-led invasion began, and Baghdad fell within weeks. In 1935, a woman helped her friend strap on kangaroo spring shoe boots fitted with metal springs. The unusual footwear promised a bouncing stride, but its exposed coils made every step a risky balancing act. On July 31, 1970, Royal Navy sailors received their daily rum ration for the last time, ending a tradition more than 3 centuries old. The event became known as Black Tot Day, and some sailors wore black armbands or held mock funerals for the final ration. In 1958, David Attenborough introduced a cockatoo to 10-year-old Prince Charles and 8-year-old Princess Anne. The future king carefully reached toward the bird as his sister watched. German soldiers crossed the Western Front wearing gas masks in 1917. Poison gas could blind, burn, or kill within minutes, so every soldier had to keep his mask close. This is the Pyramid of the Niches at El Tajin, before restoration in 1913 and today. Its 365 niches may have represented the days of the solar year. These suitcases belong to people deported to Nazi concentration camps, allowed to carry only a few possessions. Displayed in Gdansk's Museum of the Second World War, each one marks a life violently uprooted. In 1848, 5-year-old Yoruba Princess Aina saw her parents killed and was taken to King Gezo's court. 2 years later, she was given to a British officer, renamed Sarah Forbes Bonetta, and eventually became Queen Victoria's goddaughter. Albina Mali Hocevar joined the Slovenian resistance at just 16 and fought the Nazi occupation. She survived 3 combat wounds, but a mine blast in 1943 took her left eye and permanently scarred her face. This is Nakajima's Oda aircraft factory after an American raid devastated it on February 10, 1945. The abandoned planes are Ki-115 Tsurugi, crude one-seat kamikaze aircraft built to carry one heavy bomb. Baku's Black City packed about 150 oil refineries into a smoke-filled industrial district. A visitor in 1890 wrote that the walls, ground, air, and even the sky seemed black with oil and fumes. On December 25, 1937, goalkeeper Sam Bartram guarded an empty field after thick fog stopped the match. 15 minutes later, a policeman told him every other player had already left. A Soviet tank crew stands over a captured Nazi flag in Breslau, Germany, in 1945. One soldier wipes his muddy boots on the swastika, turning Hitler's most feared symbol into a doormat. British 3rd Infantry Division sappers search for German mines in October 1944, using early detectors and long probes. One wrong step could trigger a hidden charge, so every inch of ground had to be checked by hand. A spectator cools French cyclist Jean-Pierre Jeunet during the Tour de France on July 9, 1968. Riders had to race through brutal summer heat with little protection and no modern cooling systems. This KB-50J could refuel 3 different fighters at once, an F-100 Super Sabre, an F-101 Voodoo, and an F-105 Thunder Chief. Extra jet engines gave the aging bomber enough speed to keep pace during refueling. A German aircraft photographed bombs striking the Soviet cruiser Chervona Ukraina in Sevastopol on November 12, 1941. 2 direct hits killed about 70 sailors, and the crippled warship sank the next day. In 1913, during the Balkan Wars, an Ottoman prisoner washes his feet before his final prayer. Behind him, Bulgarian soldiers prepare the wooden gallows where he will be executed. A farmer and 2 boys display a huge day's catch of freshwater crayfish in Manaya, Waikato. Taken in the early 1900s, the photo reveals how astonishingly abundant local rivers once were. A Georgian fighter celebrates after killing an enemy sniper in Sukhumi in 1993. The brutal Abkhaz War often forced former Soviet countrymen to fight each other. Files released in the 1980s revealed how Operation Plum Bob exposed soldiers and nearby civilians to radioactive fallout. The records triggered outrage, cancer investigations, and new demands for compensation from people never warned about the danger. A Belgian city lies shattered after a bombing, with entire buildings ripped open and the street buried in debris. Civilians returned almost immediately, risking unstable ruins to search for survivors and recover what remained. Built in 1896, this was the first mechanical tunnel boring machine, designed to crush through rock without picks. Its rotating steel cutters helped create the technology used for modern subway and underwater tunnels. Rotterdam, after the German bombing of May 14, 1940, photographed after the rubble was cleared. The medieval St. Lawrence Church remained standing amid a city center where nearly 25,000 homes were destroyed. Swiss police took these photographs and fingerprints of Benito Mussolini in Bern in 1903 after arresting him for vagrancy. 19 years later, the young drifter became Italy's dictator. In 1977, Arnold Schwarzenegger flexed on a Cannes beach with dancers from the Folies Bergère. The publicity stunt promoted Pumping Iron, the documentary that launched his film career. Around 1931, Mahatma Gandhi wore only a simple loincloth to identify with India's poorest people. That same year, he met King George V, dressed this way, later saying the king wore enough for both of them. On April 14, 1935, the Black Sunday storm turned daylight into darkness across the Great Plains. It carried an estimated 300,000 tons of soil and forced people to breathe through wet cloths. Armed prisoners called trustees guard other inmates at Arkansas's Cummins Prison Farm in 1971. This brutal system gave selected convicts rifles and power over field laborers. Chinese prisoners wear heavy wooden kangyus during the Boxer Uprising in 1900. The boards restrained their hands and publicly displayed their alleged crimes while they awaited punishment. This casket carried President Kennedy's body from Dallas to Washington in 1963. 3 years later, officials drilled holes in it, filled it with sandbags, and dropped it from a military plane into the Atlantic Ocean. A United States Marine carries an M60 machine gun through Hue on February 6, 1968. Viet Cong forces had seized much of the city, triggering one of the Tet Offensive's longest and bloodiest battles. In December 1920, 5 Byron Company photographers took one of history's earliest group selfies on a New York rooftop. Joseph Byron and Ben Falk held the bulky camera at arm's length, a difficult feat decades before selfie sticks existed. Winston Churchill appears with his wife Clementine on his 90th birthday, November 30th, 1964. It was his final birthday, just 55 days before his death. In 1945, a TBF Avenger tipped onto its nose after a landing mishap aboard the training carrier USS Wolverine. The pilot climbed out as sailors prepared to repair the flight deck gouged by the propeller blades. Conjoined twins Mary and Margaret Gibb became vaudeville performers after moving from Massachusetts to New York. Margaret later ended her engagement because nobody would officiate the marriage, and the sisters returned home to run a gift shop for 7 years. Sergeant Nikolai Meshkov commands a B-4 heavy howitzer during the Battle of Berlin in 1945. Its massive 203mm shells could smash fortified buildings, clearing the way for advancing Soviet troops. In 1914, Charles was a station master on the Great Northern Railway, famous for his stern look and perfect mustache. He later served the London and Northeastern Railway and likely waved the Flying Scotsman through on its journey between London and Edinburgh. In 1994, 89-year-old oil billionaire J. Howard Marshall married 26-year-old model Anna Nicole Smith. After his death 14 months later, she fought his family for decades over his fortune. The Soviet submarine K-56 enters Helsinki harbor as sailors stand on its deck. Its arrival brought a rare Soviet military visitor into Finland's capital. On February 17, 1926, an avalanche blocked water in Bingham City Creek and Cottonwood Canyons. In Sap and Doty Gulches, rescuers feared over 18 deaths as they recovered bodies from burning wreckage buried in heavy snow. In the 1880s, 3 girls posed beside the Ög 46 runestone in Sweden. Its ancient inscription says, "Vibern raised it for his brother Solva." Castle Romeo exploded at Bikini Atoll before sunrise on March 27, 1954. Its unexpected 11-megaton blast was almost 3 times stronger than predicted. Lee Miller sat in Hitler's bathtub in Munich on April 30, 1945, the day he killed himself. Hours earlier, she had photographed Dachau, and her muddy boots stained the bath mat beside Hitler's portrait. An RAF dentist uses a foot-powered drill inside a mobile surgery in the Western Desert during the Second World War. These units treated aircrew and ground teams at remote bases without reliable electricity. At 16, Walt Disney changed his birth date to join the Red Cross. He arrived in France after the war ended and drove ambulances covered with his own cartoons. In 1916, Manfred von Richthofen pets his Great Dane, Moritz, on a German airfield. Moritz often accompanied the future Red Baron and once lost part of an ear during an aerial attack. In 1934, these 4 women formed the championship shooting team at the University of Missouri. Their confident pose captured a time when female college shooters competed with real firearms decades before women's sports gained broad recognition. In 1982, Soviet engineers were building Buran, their answer to the American space shuttle. 6 years later, it completed its only spaceflight and landed entirely under automatic control. This early 1940s photograph shows 2 parents with all 9 of their daughters and not a single son. Even the baby in her father's arms is another girl. In 1936, the swollen Stony Creek River surged into Johnstown, with Joseph Johns Junior High School visible beyond the flooded streets. The disaster caused millions of dollars in damage and pushed Congress to approve major flood control projects. These 22,000-pound Grand Slam bombs await delivery in January 1945. Designed by Barnes Wallis, each bomb penetrated deep underground before exploding, creating an artificial earthquake that shattered reinforced targets. Combat engineers clear a Soviet minefield on the Eastern Front in December 1943. One missed mine could kill an entire team, and this photograph captures a detonation only meters from the men. On January 27, 1945, a Japanese anti-aircraft shell tore through the cockpit of a B-24 bomber, wounding its co-pilot and navigator. Despite the shattered cockpit, the pilot flew back to base and landed without losing anyone. In 1961, workers at Toronto's Simpson department store packed mountains of mail orders by hand. Many customers had no credit cards, so they paid the postman only when their parcel arrived. Sculptor Nikolai Tomsky works on a monument to General Ivan Chernyakhovsky, the youngest Soviet Army general of the war. Chernyakhovsky was killed by a shell fragment in East Prussia on February 18, 1945, just 80 days before Victory Day. In 1909, the Excelsior Redwood Company hauled enormous redwood logs by train from forests near Eureka, California. Workers rode beside and even on top of the unsecured timber. Workers at the Dubois Brewing Company handled bottles by hand inside this crowded Pennsylvania factory. Before modern automation, every batch demanded intense physical labor, from filling and sealing bottles to moving heavy barrels across the brewery floor. In 1967, the tanker Torrey Canyon struck a reef and spilled up to 36 million gallons of crude oil. Britain bombed the wreck with explosives and napalm, but the burning failed to stop the disaster. This German scooter from 1919 used a 4-cylinder engine, an astonishing feature for such a tiny machine. Its long motor sat beneath the rider's feet, creating one of the strangest vehicles of the early 20th century. Workers marked the border between the Soviet and British sectors at Berlin's Potsdamer Platz on August 21, 1948. This simple line would soon become one of the Cold War's most dangerous frontiers. Donald Smith drives the Canadian Pacific Railway's last spike in British Columbia on November 7, 1885. Behind him stands Sanford Fleming, the engineer who helped build Canada's railways and introduced worldwide standard time zones. Adolf Hitler visits Dresden's Degenerate Art Exhibition in 1935, where modern works were displayed for public ridicule. His bizarre size is just forced perspective, not evidence that Hitler was a dwarf. A Polish immigrant carries everything he owns aboard a ship bound for Ellis Island in 1907. That year, a record 1.25 million immigrants passed through the station, more than in any other year. In 1961, East German workers built the Berlin Wall under armed guard, sealing streets and splitting families overnight. The barrier soon stretched 96 miles around West Berlin, turning escape attempts into deadly risks. After firefighters battled the 1912 Equitable Life-Building Fire in freezing weather, their water turned the 1870 Manhattan landmark into an ice-covered ruin. 6 people died, and the building was later demolished. German bombs devastated London's Docklands on September 17, 1940, destroying homes, warehouses, and vital port facilities. The docks were targeted because they handled supplies essential to Britain's survival. German paratroopers descend over Crete in May 1941 during the first major airborne invasion in history. They captured the island, but devastating losses convinced Hitler never to attempt another large airborne assault. Nuclear physicist Werner Xulius and technician Willy Hennig at Germany's secret Gotha Research Center in 1942 or 1943. After the war, Xulius was taken to the Soviet Union and worked on its atomic program. Elvis Presley served with the 3rd Armored Division in West Germany and trained on the M48 Patton tank. This rare 1960 photograph shows the superstar completing his military duty just weeks before returning home. Sunlight pierced bullet holes in an aircraft hangar where British troops sheltered during the Falklands War in April 1982. Each bright beam revealed damage left by gunfire inside their makeshift refuge. In 1947, skiers relaxed outside an aspen bar after tackling the slopes of Colorado. The scene captures early American après-ski culture when simple wooden skis and mountain sunshine were enough after a freezing day. In the 1970s, Andre the Giant posed on the lap of wrestler Peter Maivia, Dwayne Johnson's grandfather and one of his closest friends. Andre later became legendary for allegedly drinking 119 bottles of beer in 6 hours. This photo shows the alien costume being fitted for the Man from Planet X in 1951. The low-budget film became one of the first movies to turn Cold War fear into an extraterrestrial invasion story. Margaret Thatcher tried on body armor during a military visit in 1978. 2 years earlier, the Soviet newspaper Red Star had called her the Iron Lady, a nickname she proudly turned into her political brand. This 1944 photograph inspired the claim that Edith Piaf secretly made false identity papers for prisoners after visiting a camp in Germany. The dramatic escape story became famous, but historians have found no reliable evidence that it happened. This 1904 photograph shows a Navajo man dressed as To-Nainili, the rain god. Known as a playful trickster, the god was portrayed by masked dancers who also acted like clowns during ceremonies. This Hooverville housed homeless families during the Great Depression around 1930. The camps were named after President Herbert Hoover, whom many Americans blamed for the crisis. During the Satanic Panic, police accused the West Memphis Three of ritual murder, partly because they liked heavy metal and horror books. No physical evidence linked them to the killings, yet they spent 18 years in prison before their release in 2011. In 1962, officers aboard Soviet submarine B-59 believed war had begun and prepared to fire a nuclear torpedo. Launching required 3 approvals, but Vasily Arkhipov refused, stopping an attack that could have triggered global nuclear war. In 1938, this strange beak guard let chickens eat, but stopped them from pecking feathers and wounds. It protected weaker birds and prevented injured chickens from hurting themselves. In 1970, model Simone Harris stood on a Sydney street in a bikini, holding $20 for the first man who asked why. For 30 minutes, hundreds walked past, but nobody asked the question or claimed the money. In 1953, a Navy SNJ-5C Texan crashed during carrier training aboard USS Monterey. The camera caught the aircraft standing almost vertically on one wing before it plunged into the sea. In 1930, Mary Ann MacLeod left Scotland for America with only $50 and worked as a maid. She later married rising businessman Fred Trump and became the mother of Donald Trump. In November 1942, Finnish soldiers photographed a captured Soviet spy laughing moments before his execution. The image remained classified for decades because officials feared his fearless smile could become powerful Soviet propaganda. Virginia Hall spied for Britain and France, organized sabotage, and became one of the Nazis' most wanted enemies. In 1942, she escaped occupied France by crossing the Pyrenees on foot with a prosthetic leg she called Cuthbert. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 killed about 300 people and destroyed more than 3 square miles. Over 100,000 residents were left homeless as entire neighborhoods vanished in just 2 days. This 1938 cosmetic bracelet hid 7 compartments inside an ordinary-looking piece of jewelry. A rotating outer band revealed a mirror, lipstick, face powder, rouge, and applicators. This couple posed with their 16 children during the 1960s. The mother is holding 2 babies at once, while the other 14 children stand in a carefully arranged line beside their parents. 18-year-old Brigitte Bardot married Roger Vadim in Paris in 1952 after her parents had fiercely opposed their relationship. 4 years later, Vadim turned her into an international sensation with a God-created woman. British customs officers inspect Soviet gold worth 500,000 pounds in 1928. It arrived just 1 year after Britain cut diplomatic ties with Moscow, making the shipment politically explosive. After his Grumman Guardian crashed during takeoff from USS Block Island, pilot E.H. Berry escaped into the rough Atlantic. A rescue helicopter pulled him from the sea as his aircraft sank on August 12, 1953. On September 20, 1991, a Serbian boy watched a Yugoslav army tank enter Sid near the Croatian border. The armored convoy was heading toward the escalating war in Croatia. In February 1945, 9th United States Army signalmen repaired communication wires near Echt in the Netherlands. Behind them, huge graffiti declared, "1918? Never again," a bitter promise shattered by another world war. In 1933, photographer Alfred Eisenstadt captured Joseph Goebbels smiling at a League of Nations conference. Moments later, Goebbels learned Eisenstadt was Jewish, and his expression turned into the cold glare seen in the second photograph. A young woman smiles while picking cotton in Florida in 1945. The rare Kodachrome image preserves the vivid colors of exhausting fieldwork during the final year of World War II. On January 11, 1937, striking General Motors workers fought Flint police after the company cut off heat and food deliveries. Workers drove back tear gas and gunfire with car parts and freezing water, forcing police to retreat. This is Wessel, Germany in 1945, after Allied bombing destroyed about 97% of the town. The cratered ground shows where entire streets and buildings vanished before Allied forces crossed the Rhine nearby. In April 1982, a fire destroyed the diesel power station at Vostok and killed its chief mechanic. 20 men then survived the Antarctic winter without normal heat or electricity, using improvised stoves and one small generator. RMS Mauritania leaves the River Tyne in 1906, surrounded by tugboats and spectators. She later became the fastest Atlantic liner and held the speed record for over 20 years. Inside the secret Mittelwerk tunnels, Dora Mittelbau prisoners were forced to assemble electrical parts for Germany's V-2 rockets. Thousands died from starvation, disease, executions, and brutal underground labor while producing the world's first long-range guided missile. Local residents built dugouts among the ruins of Stalingrad in 1942, hiding from bombs, artillery, and freezing weather. Civilians survived for months beneath a city where one of history's deadliest battles killed or wounded nearly 2 million people. Soviet submachine gunners of the 3rd Ukrainian Front fight through Budapest in 1945. The battle lasted more than 100 days, and fierce house-to-house combat left much of the Hungarian capital in ruins. A demonstrator is arrested during the 1963 Birmingham campaign against racial segregation. Images of police brutality shocked the nation and helped build support for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Anne Frank ice skates with friends in Amsterdam's Vondelpark during the winter of 1941. Just months later, Nazi rules banned Jews from entering public parks. During the Second World War, thousands of children were evacuated from London to escape German bombing. This photograph captures the emotional moment when some finally returned home and rushed into their parents' arms. Hamburg crowds welcome Wehrmacht soldiers returning from defeated France in 1940. Their BMW R12 motorcycles had sidecars and were widely used for reconnaissance, communications, and transporting machine gun crews. In 1967, Barclays opened the world's first cash machine in London after John Shepherd Barron imagined a bank that worked like a chocolate dispenser. It used radioactive paper vouchers, and actor Reg Varney made the first withdrawal. Switchboard operators in Calbar, Queensland, manually connected every phone call in 1954. By plugging cords into the correct sockets, they controlled the town's entire telephone network from this single room. Write in the comments, which photo did you like the most?